Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. In this video, we are going to discuss about cholinergic system and cholinergic agonists. So the autonomic nervous system is divided into two main groups according to the type of neurons involved in their mechanism of action. One is the parasympathetic system, which is also known as the cholinergic system. And on the other hand, we have sympathetic nervous system, which is also known as adrenergic nervous system. Both of these groups, they are also different in terms of receptors. As you can see in this figure, we have parasympathetic nervous system and its specific receptors, which are muscarinic and nicotinic receptor. And along with that, the receptor subtype are also mentioned. And the neurotransmitter of the cholinergic system is acetylcholine. So acetylcholine is acting on those receptors when we talk about cholinergic or parasympathetic nervous system. Whereas when we are talking about the sympathetic nervous system, the specific receptors of the sympathetic nervous system are known as the adrenergic receptors. You can see we have alpha and beta, and further the receptor subtype is also mentioned, which we'll discuss in detail ahead. And these receptors are stimulated by the neurotransmitter norepinephrine or epinephrine, which are also known as adrenaline or non-adrenaline. So very simply, if you have to understand, you have to keep in mind that the cholinergic system, the head of the cholinergic system is acetylcholine, or the neurotransmitter which is responsible for the functions of the cholinergic neuronal transmitter is the acetylcholine. While in case of sympathetic nervous system, we have adrenaline or noradrenaline. We are going to discuss regarding the concept of cholinergic agonist. What is a cholinergic agonist actually? By cholinergic agonist, we mean all those drugs that activate the cholinergic receptors. So they are known as cholinergic agonist. So when we are talking about acetylcholine, you can see in this figure that the preganglionic fibers, which are terminating in the adrenal medulla, the autonomic ganglia of both the sympathetic and parasympathetic, and the postganglionic fibers of the parasympathetic division, all of them use acetylcholine as a neurotransmitter. So this is a very important concept that you have to keep in mind regarding the acetylcholine. So not only the peripheral nervous system, but acetylcholine also has a very important role in the central nervous system. We are going now to discuss about the acetylcholine synthesis. You have to keep in mind that the neuron which synthesizes acetylcholine is known as the cholinergic neuron. Very simply, the factory is named according to the product. So the product is acetylcholine. As a result, the name of the neuron that synthesizes this product, or the factory that synthesizes this product, is called as the cholinergic neuron. So whenever we are talking about cholinergic neuron, you have to keep in mind that this neuron is releasing and synthesizing acetylcholine. So this figure shows the neurotransmission at the cholinergic neuron, and this neurotransmission in the cholinergic neuron actually involves 6 very important steps that we are going to discuss one by one. So the first step is the synthesis of acetylcholine. Well, acetylcholine is formed by the combination, or we can say the conjugation, of two important components. One is the choline and other one is the acetyl-CoA. So you can see it very clearly in this figure, the conjugation of choline and acetyl-CoA. Well, choline is actually transported from the ECF. It enters into the exoplasm of the cholinergic neuron with the help of an energy dependent carrier system. It is actually co-transported with sodium. You can see both of them are entering the exoplasm of this neuron. In this figure, you can see that the other source of obtaining choline is the degradation or the breakdown of acetylcholine in the synaptic cleft. So, choline could be also obtained from the recycled acetylcholine. So now when we are talking about the conjugation process of choline and acetyl-CoA, this process takes place with the help of an enzyme which is known as the choline acetyl transferase. It can also be called CAT, choline acetyl transferase enzyme. The choline acetyl transferase enzyme itself is synthesized in the nerve cell, and then it travels down to reach the exoplasm, where it acts and plays an important role in the synthesis of acetylcholine. Now we move towards the next step, which is the storage of acetylcholine in the vesicles. So after being synthesized, the acetylcholine molecules, they are stored in vesicles, which are known also as synaptic vesicles. You can see in this figure. Now the third step, which is the release of the neurotransmitter acetylcholine. So this release of acetylcholine takes place as a result of the action potential that develops in this axon, which is actually induced by the voltage sensitive sodium channels, which ultimately opens the voltage sensitive calcium channels, and as a result the calcium ions, they enter from the ECF into the inside of the axon. You can see in this figure that the calcium is entering from the ECF into the axon, and as a result it causes the fusion of these vesicles with the membrane, which is known as the presynaptic membrane of the cholinergic neuron. So when the acetyl molecules, they are released in the synaptic cleft, they, with the help of the diffusion, bind with their specific receptors, the acetylcholine receptors, which you can see on the postsynaptic membrane and also on the presynaptic membrane. So they are known as the postsynaptic and presynaptic receptors. So there are some sort of poisons that can interrupt this neuronal transmission. One such is the botulinum toxin. This toxin actually prevents the release of acetylcholine. And we have the other one, which is the spider venom, that actually accelerates the process of the release of acetylcholine. So these are the toxins that can interrupt this neuronal transmission. So now we will discuss the fourth step, which is binding to the receptor. So in case of the acetylcholine, there are two types of receptor. Generally we call them acetylcholine receptor, but they are divided into two different classes. One is the muscarinic receptor and the other one is the nicotinic receptor. So you have to remember that as soon as this neurotransmitter binds with the specific receptors, it will lead to some kind of biological response within the cell. And now we will discuss the fifth step, which is the degradation or the breakdown of acetylcholine. So now you have to remember a very important enzyme which is responsible for the breakdown, or we can say the degradation of acetylcholine, and that is acetylcholine esterase. This acetylcholine esterase enzyme actually breaks this acetylcholine into two portions. One is the choline and the other one is acetate in the synaptic cleft.